I'll go ahead and maybe I'll share. Oh, there we go. All right. Everybody see that okay?
Looks good.
So maybe we'll just start off. Oh, Esty has her hand up.
No, I'm just confused. I'll get with the program soon.
Okay. I was like, man, questions already. Holy cow.
I know that does sound like me, but not today.
But all right, as people are coming on, if we wanted to just have Jacqueline, do you want to do roll call real quick?
Sure. Okay, if you could just say your name and your affiliation for the recording. I'll just go down my list here. Esty,
SD Aiken, University of Montana Western.
great, thank you. Christine,
Good morning, Christine Lux, Montana State University, Bozeman.
good morning.
Good morning.
Adria,
Adria Lawrence, University of Montana, Missoula.
good morning. Tricia,
Good morning, Tricia Seifert, Montana State University, Bozeman.
thanks for being here. Sarah,
Sarah Pennington, Montana State University, Bozeman.
thank you very much. I think that's everybody so far.
Okay.
Woohoo.
Well, welcome. I hope everybody had a good, enjoyable weekend, and we'll go ahead and get started. So just quickly recapping kind of the process and the outcomes that we're shooting for with the Chapter 58 Task Force. By October, we had two broad sort of deliverables. The first being specific changes to Chapter 58 in the ARM, and then some broader sort of recommendations that might not necessarily be in the ARM, but would be things that we would encourage the superintendent and the Board of Public Ed to look at going down the road. And the way that we decided to attack sort of getting through this was to have what we called lever topics, which were sort of broad topics. And the idea was that the discussion around those topics would lend itself to going back and look into the relevant sections of the ARM, and then, recommending the changes that would sort of reflect sort of the vision and the discussion within the task force around those things. And those topics were pedagogy and content, real world experience, more robust observations and mentorship, continuous improvement, desire for lifelong learning, relationships, and appropriate technical skills and knowledge. So that's the way that we approached that in our facilitation with the task force. But most of the early discussion was on subchapters 1, 3, and 5. And I would say that one of the challenges was that we spent a lot of time having those broad discussions, which I think was good. But getting folks kind of really into the ARM and saying, okay, this is what we've talked about, but where does that change need to occur in the ARM was a little more of a challenge to really get folks diving into that. But within subchapter 5, really most of the change recommendations are around in 501, which is just the general teaching standards. And I think the big changes there, where I believe it was to section B and L, included the word language, referring to tribal languages. And then help me out here, Jacqueline. I think in section G, there was some language that was trying to get at the idea of, teachers being more proficient in delivery of social emotional learning. Although I think that's one that There was a recommendation made, but I think there's going to be, that one's going to be revisited. So I think those were kind of the big ones. Did I miss anything, Jacqueline?
Hold on one second. We voted on the one, yeah, you said 501A, yep, B, I'm just going over. G, there was a small change we still need to look at. And L, and that's all for 501.
But that was where a lot of our sort of early efforts were really focused, was on 501. And then, and I believe we've already heard from folks on this, but there was a change recommendation to 312D.
Trying to find
include
that.
the language around payment as allowed by law.
Yeah, we did talk about that. Here we go, 312D. Yep, incorporate language. Pre-service teachers are authorized to receive payment to the extent allowed by law. We talked about that quite a bit with this group.
We did. So that's kind of a recap of where we were, I think, kind of last time we met with this group. I think the biggest things that have happened since have been, there have been some members of the task force that really looked at sections 3, 6, and 7, or subchapters. I keep saying sections, subchapters 3, 6, and 7, and really writing some change recommendations in those that work to align those subsections more with CAPE. And I believe when we were on this meeting last time, that was something that people in this group, at least those that were here last time, seem to support. So there's been some work around that. And then is, you know, the subchapter 501 is the general teaching standards, and then the other sections are all around the specific endorsement areas, you know, so math, science, ELA, industrial arts, computer science, all of those things. And I believe it was Ann Eubank had made a recommendation that we look at the ARM and then compare it with sort of whatever the national or professional standards are, and then look at making some changes in those areas. And the way that we had kind of envisioned this was that we would sort of farm that out to individual experts, and they could, you know, take a look at that and, you know, help us with those change recommendations. You know, so the idea of having folks that have, you know, expertise in those areas could look at those two sets of the ARM and the standards and then say, well, this probably should be worded like this or that type of a thing. But we've had a little bit of trouble getting traction with that. I think just we understand everybody's really busy, and you know, we kind of envisioned that if everybody took like one or two, it wouldn't be a heavy lift, but we're just didn't get a lot of traction there. But everybody liked the idea of it. And then the other thing, there's been some conversation in 312 and 606, some broad language that's really aimed at helping districts, you know, grow their own. And it's really around those placements. And I know this was kind of a, there's some mixed feelings about this, because I think some in the EPP community feel like, you know, they're already facilitating those things, and that it, you know, there didn't need to be language that specifically stated that they must do something. But I believe it was Allison Harmon and Emily Dean kind of came to some agreement on some language that was more, I would say, intentionally vague, but satisfied, you know, on the K-12 side, made them feel like there was something in the ARM to help them facilitate, grow your own, because, you know, as we all know, there are many challenges with recruitment and retention, and grow your own is one piece of that puzzle. So
And read the language aloud if you want.
Sure.
Yep. To the extent possible, providers and school partners co-construct opportunities for students to student teach, I think it's supposed to say, in the district and school of their choice, including through recruitment and retention programs adopted by school districts in accordance with statewide agreements among providers.
Yeah, and so that would go in 312
B.
and 606, which is just the
Oh, that's right.
advanced program for like administrators. So that's, I think those are kind of the big sort of things that we've worked on and talked about in the task force since the last time we met with this group. So we are sort of wrapping up. We are October 7th is supposed to be our last meeting. So we have essentially 3 more meetings. And as of last week, I think kind of where we are with the task force, these are the things that they really want to get wrapped up, is to go ahead and vote on some changes to sections 311 and 606. Again, aligning those with CAPE and PSEL, and those, we have the language. It's that has been provided. People have had opportunities to review it. So theoretically, it will just be a matter of maybe a few minor tweaks and then a vote. One of the things I will say that we have had a little bit of a challenge with as well is we have had not as many members the last few meetings. And so we actually have not had a quorum. So that's something that we're obviously concerned about, and trying to make sure that we get everybody to the table to kind of wrap up these votes on these recommendations. Again, I mentioned the recommended changes to sections 501. Those have all been already voted on, other than the language in part G that we need to go back and revisit. And there's just a minor change that folks want to make it just a little bit shorter and clearer and not quite as ambiguous. And then, we've already voted on the broad recommendations for tribal language, sign language, and ESL as endorsement areas. And then again, we have, I believe Stevie Schmitz at Rocky has really done some work in subchapters 6 and 7 also to help us align that better with CAPE and PSEL. And again, I think she's still working out some of those changes, but the idea would be that between now and October 7th, that language would be finalized and voted on for recommendation. And I see, do I have a hand raised?
Yes, you do.
Andrea.
Okay.
Help is more closely aligned with prep programs for advanced.
And I think she did, I believe she did mention that. Did she not, Jacqueline?
I don't remember that. When did you speak to her since our last meeting on Thursday, Adria?
No, this was in earlier conversation.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. But I just wanted to make sure this was on the record. So, we're going through the accreditation process right now, and we've been doing quite a bit of work on the advanced standards. And the NELP is much more closely aligned with prep programs. And my understanding is, it's the same group that has detailed the NELP as well as the PSEL standards.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe she did mention that. And I think it was like PSEL/NELP, and I might have just forgot to put that in my presentation today, but we can certainly double check on that. And so this would be for advanced programs, you said?
Correct.
Okay. So
Thank
we
you.
can definitely check on that with her. on Thursday.
I
but
do see that. I do see that. I'm looking at, we still have some work to do here to incorporate PSEL NELP standards. She uses a slash, so she does, she remembers this.
Okay. All right, and I've been going really fast, is that, or I'm almost to the point of just opening it up for conversation, but is there anything else before I go on that anybody wants to say first? Okay. So yeah, I think the sort of the end game is by October 7th, that the change recommendations to 3, 6, 7, and those ones I referenced in 501 will be, voted upon for final recommendation and sent to the superintendent. Also, the broad recommendations around including a tribal language, American Sign Language, and ESL endorsements. But we've also had, as I mentioned, the endorsement areas, getting those experts to help us look at those 2 sets of standards. We haven't had the movement that we had anticipated, and we don't feel that we'll be able to get that completed by the timeline. So there is agreement that we will ask the Board of Public Ed for a revised timeline on those, just on those endorsement areas in subchapter 5, as well as possibly go back and look at some more research questions. And that was, something that we have heard a little bit. Those 2 kind of things is we haven't brought enough expertise to this group, and also that the research maybe wasn't as comprehensive or as thorough as it could have been. So we're trying to leave that open for the task force to explore those 2 things beyond October 7th. However, I think it'll be a process of we won't meet every week. I mean, this has been a grind doing the and I do have to say, I mean, we've had some real champions, folks that have been there every week, contributing to this work in a meaningful way. But it's a grind, and I think it will be more something that we kind of chunk out some work and kind of assign folks some things to do, and then check in every 3 weeks, once a month, something like that, to try to finalize this. But we still have to talk through all those things, obviously, before we go to Board of Public Ed and request a revised timeline. So that's what I have on my end. At this point, I would open it up for questions or comments.
I'm just curious if we'll be able to see the entire proposed revised document at some point, just so that we can see the specific language that's cut. And that could even be emailed. I just would like to see all of the proposed changes.
Yeah, sure. I think we have that, do we not?
But we don't have all of, yes, I can pull up the full tracker and show what's been approved by what's been voted on, and what I've started putting in blue what isn't, that we're still discussing. I'd be happy to share my screen.
Okay, let me stop.
So the blue is a little bit ugly. Okay. It's very small, so I apologize, but we can blow up what has been changed. Nothing in 1, 2, nothing in 2. We're working on 3 right now. Okay, so here's the first place. This is in 312B. I'll make it bigger. And this is the one I read aloud earlier. Hold on, sorry. Can folks see that? I apologize, it's not, okay. The red, obviously. This was the language that was massaged a little bit to make sure that it didn't lock folks into something, EPP folks and others, into something that isn't possible. And it's meant to help support grow your own programs.
No one saw that language as redundant to what's already available. That was a question, not a statement.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody thought it was redundant. I think what I heard was people saying, well, we're already doing this. But we don't want something that, locks us in. But there was a desire on the side of like School Boards Association and school administrators in Montana to include this language.
Zach, could you speak a little bit around what's the motivation behind this? And I guess I'm trying to understand how this language modifies what is currently in place and why that's desirable to those stakeholder groups, like how this achieves that end.
Well, what I heard was that there have been cases of districts trying to do grow your own, but then they get in a situation where they can't, that candidate can't be placed in the school or the district where they're trying to achieve that. And so that presents some challenges because oftentimes those folks are not, they're not, it's not like they're 19, 20, 21 where they can, move somewhere to do a student teaching or something like that. Oftentimes they've been in that community and they're pretty established. And so, we heard a lot, from EPP folks that, they do everything they possibly can to accommodate these. But the goal would be that collectively we could work towards a situation where those things would not be happening.
So I guess I'm just to clarify. So are the school districts saying we have local community members who are completing their educator preparation and they want a student teach here in our local community and we're having difficulty being able to get a placement for them, like that the EPPs are having some resistance to that?
I don't know if it's resistance or just that, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because they have they have others already placed there. I don't know, but what I do know is that was what I heard from Sam and School Boards Association is that they are anecdotally having people coming to them and talking about this.
That's helpful. I haven't had that experience. Certainly, I think if we were to talk to our field placement and licensure folks and asked, hey, if a current student is interested in student teaching in a high need community, can we help them out? My experience has been our field placement folks bend over backwards. My concern about this language in red is students to student teach in the district and school of their choice. And let me just frame why this could be problematic. So our students in Bozeman very much want to teach and do their student teaching in Bozeman. If in the ARM, we have language that specifies that we will have some clarity and commitment to student teaching in the district and school of their choice, we may have students who will never leave Bozeman to student teach, and we cannot possibly meet the students' interest and need relative to the number of placements that are available. And so I'm concerned that there could be a very negative unintended consequence with our current student teachers having in the arm support for them not to student teach in Whitehall. Does that make sense, my concern there?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think that's why that language starts out with the word verbiage "to the extent possible." Because originally the language said must, and that
Mm.
was really where that was the sticking point in the conversation. So that's why they changed it to say "to the extent possible."
And I appreciate that. I'm wondering though, the downstream effects may have greater negative consequence than what we're trying to achieve with this language. And I think it's really important that that be reflected in the record of our conversation, especially given the fact that experiences from field placement and licensure is we will bend over backwards to ensure that a student who wants to student teach in Conrad has that opportunity, to the point of like working with community members to find them housing, and like it's pretty extensive amount of effort. And so to put in the arm even to the extent possible, I'm just thinking a student who gets a bee in their bonnet that they really want to push this arm around, hey, I'm not leaving Missoula, I'm not leaving Dillon, I'm not leaving Bozeman, may tie us up in legal conversations around our placement procedures with consequences that weren't intended.
Okay.
And I would just add that we place less than 10% of our student teachers in Dillon. So Tricia's point is very well taken, that there's just, and many of them, they have houses rented, they have friends, like they would like to stay. Those are conveniences. Those have nothing to do with the teaching shortage. Additionally, when you're talking about place-based folks, Zach, those folks are generally in some of our distance programs. And then they're already working closely with their local school. In fact, their local school may be paying for them. They're under a class 5. I mean, there are a variety of things here. That's why I worry about this language quite a bit. And I actually worry equally about something that you just said, that this is based on anecdotal storytelling. And that really bothers me because I'm a school board member and this isn't a concern of our school board. So if MTSBA, unless they're taking an official stance and have research to back that, I don't want to see changes proposed on one school had a hard time, because frankly, right now we would hear a lot of those stories. I mean, we're dealing with juniors being hired under emergency licenses. So I understand the teaching shortage. I don't want to go about this in the wrong way. And then, as Tricia said, have these unintended consequences for students who this policy doesn't even touch them. It's not even a concern. It would just give them leverage to pursue something that may not be best for all. And because you made this contrast of these aren't 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and yet that's the bulk of who we're placing. So I want to be really clear with the intricacies of what we're trying to do here. And district and school, because grow your own, I would not read this language and think of it as grow your own. Then I'm thinking, what is our dual enrollment? That's going to impact grow your own. What are our sustainable factors in rural communities so that they can do long-term field placements? That's grow your own. I mean, I just want to be really clear with what we're trying to do here. And I don't think this language addresses grow your own. And again, to Tricia's point, like knowing the context is really helpful, but if it's just based anecdotally, because we actually have data that could help us with this decision-making. So I'd hate to insert language that will tie our hands down the road based on anecdotal evidence.
All right, well, thank you for that. One thing I will say is what I heard a little bit too was, well, we're already doing this, so it doesn't need to be in here. And so that, I guess, does beg a little question to me as to why there might be objection to doing something, to putting something in language that's already occurring. But I think I certainly note and hear your points. And that they are on record.
And I would say the reason that we would, and Western would say that we do this, in the context of those place-bound students. The reason that I would prefer this language not exist is because it's case to case. And we can communicate to our learners what we see a bigger picture. This language doesn't allow the bigger picture to be seen. It brings everybody to a flat playing field of all of you should be allowed your first choice. And that's a very different place than we are right now. So I think that's the subtlety in while we're already doing this, we are for some, but not for all. And for all, that would be, it's actually an equity issue that we need to have the capacity to work with each of our students in different ways. So fair is not equal and equal is not fair. We're looking for equity of placement. So not the same rule applies to all, if that makes sense. So I think just to speak to your point that why would we care if it's put in language that we're doing it already? Because it's more than that, then we need more language. And I don't want, this document doesn't need more language, it needs clearer language. So I think that adding this just muddies the water.
All right, well, thank you for that.
All right, we can share that with the group this Thursday. Let me see where else we have some changes that we've talked about. Oh, gosh, where's the word language? Pre-service teachers are authorized. Okay. How come that's not read? Do we not put that in? Maybe we didn't pick a place to put that yet. This is the one we discussed in a previous meeting with the group. Pre-service teachers are authorized to receive, that's not spelled right, payment to the extent allowed by law. In my understanding, we did talk about this with the task force. This is already allowed. And it's here to open the door to clinical experiences.
Yep, but we did not put the broad recommendation to explore the year-long internships into. So this was voted on, but not the broader recommendation.
So just to be clear, is this saying that some student teachers or those in clinical placement may receive payment while others may not for the same work and effort, and it's by district to district?
I think it's just saying that if the situation merits that and it's allowed by law, that it's an option.
So then what that would mean is some students would essentially, as student teachers, receive a paid internship for the credits that they're paying for as they're enrolled in an EPP. And others will not receive a paid internship. They'll simply pay for credits. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think if it was a situation where it was like an emergency authorization or they were in some type of program, I'm trying to think. Isn't there a program with Western and like Browning, SD? And I believe they get paid, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that this is already true. And our students are allowed to sub for a fixed number of days. So it's not untrue. And I don't support this language. And I think that the EPPs, probably MCDE, will have to do some policy, some system-wide understanding to prevent exactly what you're talking about, Tricia, and work with our schools. I think it's just going to take a lot of legwork and communication to make sure that we are not, so that students aren't resisting placements, so that we don't actually get, now we're kind of coming into a loop because, they'll find out, well, this district pays student teachers. Now that's my choice district. Now we've added language that says I should get my choice. And then we'll have even the unintended consequences here again could rain down on, we do already pay some of our pre-service teachers. And as Zach mentioned, we do have these specialized programs, and it's the semantics of intern versus, because it's post-bac stuff, there's a variety of issues here, and I think we're just going to have to navigate them. I don't know. I don't have a solution. I don't think eliminating this language is going to stop that train. And I think we're going to also have to be even more well-informed on the EPP side so that we don't end up with fewer placements than we have already. So, I don't know how else to, but Zach's right. We already do have programs and systems. And the other thing too is that it becomes district to district. So we have 2 districts that don't allow our students to sub, and we have MOUs around that because the paperwork was too cumbersome for their district offices. So it kind of goes both ways. Some districts decide not to pay our interns or their student teachers, and some districts decide to pay. And then we just had a student this week drop out so she can teach under an emergency license. She's hypothetically a grown-up, like we can't stop that. So, we're going to continue to confront pay for a long time.
Anything else on that one?
Okay.
So I think it's,
This is, hold on, folks. This is 501A. I'll make it a little bigger. Just some wordsmithing, updating the language. I don't see any comments on that. And in B, and also I believe G, the word language has been inserted. No, not G, sorry, L.
L, yep.
Yep.
And then G was this is the one that instead of having that list of evidence-based instruction, interviews, and extensions, just in
Instruction and practices.
Yeah.
I'll make that bigger. But at this point, the blue language stands, or folks voted with the blue language, but then they agreed that it was unclear. So instruction and practices that support. And then inserting the word language here in L, demonstrate understanding ability to integrate history, cultural heritage, language, and contemporary status of American Indians and tribes. And then we have what I think will be broad recommendations to add subchapters around English as a second language, Indigenous language endorsements, and American Sign Language. When these are broad, we recognize there are a lot of issues involved and that these are more than just language tweaks, and they'll have to be explored further. Oops, spelling here. There any feedback on these broad recommendations?
what will be the process to solicit content experts to be part of the subchapter standard creation, the actual development of that? Will there be an invitation for this committee or the current task force members to put forth names for people who have deep expertise in these areas to contribute?
That's what we're hoping. And then do you have, Jacqueline, do you have this stuff in 6?
Right, that's right. All right, here we go. Ooh,
And that's not the correct language.
right. Yep, sorry, folks. This is not, this was already revised to what we talked about before. Thus, so it's worse.
So we do have to apologize.
I'll
We're in
update
the
this. Yeah, I
process
forgot.
of kind of compiling this for everybody, and we're not quite there yet. So we do apologize for the confusion.
And that's, I believe that's it right now. We have a bunch to look over this week and next week.
And we can certainly, I was going to ask, do we have, Virginia, do we have everybody here's email?
Yes, we do.
Okay, we can certainly share this via email when it's sort of more completed and people have time to actually, look at it without just having us kind of scroll through it. I know that's probably a little hard to read and digest. So, but that's a little bit of a flavor for where it's at. So are there other comments, suggestion, thoughts, anything?
So then can you walk us through kind of what is the timeline at this juncture? Like what will go on for October, and then where do these subsection that still need to be drafted as a, and by that I mean ESL, Indigenous languages, the ASL, like what's the timeline for that and how does that differ from the more
Yeah,
general?
well, I think my understanding would be those recommendations. I mean, all of that goes to the superintendent, and then from there, it really depends on whether those are brought forward. If the superintendent says no, we're not doing any of this, then I think that's kind of the end of it. If if the superintendent were to say, yeah, we do want to explore this, then I think it's a matter of, figuring out that timeline, who needs to be at the table, are there specific, research questions that need to be explored before we move forward.
So then can you walk me through where's the interface between the superintendent receiving recommendations and how the Board of Public Ed fits into this discussion? Because I don't think I'm clear on their role relative to this process.
So the superintendent would move the recommendations forward to them, and then they vote to formally adopt. And then I'm trying to think I apologize, there's another advisory group I think it starts with a P. It's too many acronyms, but there is another advisory group that advises Board of Public Ed that also weighs in on these before they go to, as they're considering them, I guess is how I should say that.
Yeah, I think that was the part when I sent you a note, Zach, offline in between meetings to say, I'm not clear about how this works, what the process is, like who contributes to what layer of recommendations under what timeline and how it unfolds. And I feel like having that sort of articulated out would be helpful for me just to understand like who carries the ball at what point, and then who do they pass it off to under what timeline.
Well, I can dig a little deeper on that and I can respond to your email if that's helpful.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
And on a slightly different note, I know that an invitation has gone out around chapter 55, but the form to sign up to engage in that process is still the chapter 57, 58 form. So I think there's some confusion around what's happening with chapter 55, just to throw one more chapter out there. I have colleagues trying to sign up to engage in the 55 work. And I think Adria's gone through we thought it was fixed, but it's not. So I don't know if you have any outlet there.
Virginia, you wouldn't happen to know who we would talk to about that, would you?
We could check with IT. I could check with IT and see if they're the ones that are mass emailing for the executive office. But I'll track something down.
Okay, thank you. Anything else today? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I want to thank everybody for being here and being here early on a Monday morning. Appreciate that. Appreciate all the work that you guys do and for you taking the time to provide us some thoughtful feedback. And I will follow up with you, Tricia. We will look at the form and try to make sure that that reflects the proper chapter for folks that are trying to apply to be a part of that process. We will, once we get the whole tracking document really more comprehensively updated, we'll send that out so folks have more time to look at it. Was there anything I missed there?
No.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, I hope everybody has a great day and a great week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.